Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bollywood Cinema Club, a podcast where we take a look at Indian cinema every other week. I am your host, Chris Tashi, the host of the Culture Cast, where this show was spun off from. I am joined by my good friend and soon becoming Indian film, connoisseur at least, that's for sure. Your friend and mine, graphic artist, man about town, Dustin.
Tara.
Tara. Why would you make me say this? God. On this episode of the Bollywood Cinema Club, we are going to be talking about the second film in the YRF spy universe that totally was planned. No way that the first movie in this franchise ended in a way that the sequel kind of feels forced. We're going to be talking about 2017's sequel to Ek the Tiger. We're going to be talking about Tiger Zinda Hai. So the film is directed by Ali Abbas Zafar, and it stars the one and only Salman Khan and Katrina Kaif, both returning from Ek the Tiger, along with a couple other actors returning from Ek the Tiger, specifically Girish Karnad, who plays the Chief of Raw, Chief Shenoy once again. And wouldn't you know it, the world needs Tiger and Zoya because, well, we've got a baddie played by Sajad Delafruz, who is Abu Usman, the leader of an Iraqi terrorist group who's hell-bent on taking over a hospital and, well, making a point of it. This movie is based off of the 2014 abduction of Indian nurses by ISIL, but that's essentially just the setup. That's the inspiration. The Salman Khan did not go and save, regardless of what anyone would say. Dustin, I am so very curious because you and I kind of experienced these movies out of order. We experienced Pathan first, and then Ek the Tiger, and now Tiger Zinda Hai. And I'm curious, Tiger Zinda Hai, Tiger is alive. Did this movie live up to the expectations that the first movie set?
It was different, totally different vibe of a movie. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, that like how it starts, they're trying to take how the first movie ended and connect it to this movie. I'd say once they got done with that, it was kind of kick-ass for me. I really enjoyed, and we've talked about how long these movies can be. I like that they are because it allows for a lot of, especially in these kind of movies, you get to see a lot of the espionage and the planning and the strategy that goes into what they're trying to do, instead of just trying to cram it into an hour and 20 minutes or whatever, hour and 30 minutes. It's leaves a lot of room for more entertainment, I guess. But I thought it was kick-ass. There was lots of action. Salman Khan is like an Indian Rambo. He's a badass.
Yeah, he, again, him as a person aside, he is such a fun character in this movie. And again, like you kind of mentioned, he's drawing from a lot of other similar characters that we've seen before in Western cinema, like Rambo in some parts of this movie. Again, James Bond, because he's a lot of ways he's kind of prototypical James Bond character. But yeah, for me, I enjoyed about 2/3 of this movie. I think the first third of this movie is a little narratively and tonally all over the place. Look, I don't have any issue with them having a kid and the kid kind of being this precocious little cute child, and they have to fight wolves in the wild, and it's fun. Again, in keeping with this idea from the first movie of they're on the run and they will be back when they are needed. And again, if this movie never existed, that movie ends and they're just, off having adventures in the world. And like, that's a fun way to end the movie. That's the way Buckaroo Banzai ends, right? Like, he's off in the world doing things. So, I mean, again, like this, I'm not going to say this movie feels unnecessary. That's not the case. I enjoyed this movie a lot. There's a lot of fun things in this movie, a lot of fun performances I'm sure we're going to talk about. And there's some kind of fun twists and turns. I mean, not anything that's unexpected, but the kind of twists that they do have, I think, work more or less. But I think I could have done without them all of a sudden having like a family life. I mean, again, I get what they were going for, because think about the way we reacted when we saw the trailer for Ek the Tiger the first time. There's that whole, like, I guess, like quaint living, like a normal social life that apparently they're trying to have him have as the cover. He's supposed to be like a normal guy. And it's kind of the reverse of that here. They're trying to pretend to be normal, but they're clearly, again, like unable to fight the fact that she's a secret agent and he's a secret agent, essentially. I know that they're Raw and ISI, but they're effectively both James Bond. So, which is awesome. Like, that's the way these characters should be. They should be larger than life, and it totally works. I just think by trying to ground them in reality with a kid, it kind of backfired. Like, the characters don't, it's not that they don't need it, but it doesn't, like, it doesn't add anything to their character kind of chemistry and the story. It doesn't add anything to the story overall, that's for sure. It just adds about 30 minutes to this movie that it kind of doesn't need.
I kind of thought that if it adds anything, it adds these two are badasses, but it adds that there's something to fight for that's more than just their country. It adds that layer of like a dad, a mom,
right?
And it hits different. And they find the kid that's got like the bomb strapped to himself, and like he kind of has like dad emotions to go protect him. And so it was okay in that respect, but I do agree that that first part of the movie, as I said before, once they got that done, the movie really kicked ass, because that part was just building some preface, I think, that we could have lived with or without.
I mean, again, I don't think it adds enough to justify its existence. I think you could have had half of as long a time and just, again, like I don't need to see him kicking the wolves' asses. I think that was a little too much. That's like a 10-minute scene. But yeah. I did, again, like the kid wasn't terrible. Like he wasn't this precocious little shit like the way so many kids in movies are, because kids aren't like that in real life, but they tend to be written that way by adults constantly, as like the most annoying character on screen is a child. And it's unfair in a lot of ways, because like kids aren't by definition or existence all annoying. Most aren't, but kids in movies tend to be written a certain way every time. And he's not written that way, I don't think.
No, I agree. I will say a part that was a little, even I would say more unnecessary than establishing that they have a family, was the like anniversary celebration. The whole like painting your mural in the snow.
Oh my God, it was so good. What? It was so good. It was the best kind of musical number in an Indian cinema movie. It is the one that is like the hardest to put into the movie, and it makes sense. Because like it should have just been like we've seen before in a lot of other movies that are Indian cinema, be it Bollywood or Tollywood. They essentially suspend the reality of the movie for a moment. Yeah. And it just exists kind of in this otherness of again, like the only way to describe it is it exists in the otherness of Indian cinema, which is so unique with these kinds of things. And that, like, here it just kind of feels dorky, because they're trying to pass it off as these things are all happening. And at one point, he literally throws a can of paint onto the snow, and he paints her picture in the paint snow with like a hockey stick. And it's just, there's a lot of kind of unintentionally funny things at the beginning of this movie. That is one of them. And then the other thing is when Salman Khan is fighting the wolves, it's CGI wolves, and his son's like, if you're the real tiger, you won't kill these wolves. And he's like, fucking okay, kid. So he grabs a stick, and it's just him waving a stick at CGI wolves for like 10 seconds. And again, Salman Khan's a great actor, so he totally makes it work. But my God, don't linger on it that long, because after a while, he really does look kind of like a dingus. Yeah. But it's just that musical number was unnecessary, to say the least.
Yeah, and that was a lot of candles in the road. I don't know who set all those up.
Look, I mean, we've seen it before in Indian cinema. We'll see it again. That's why I love it. That's why you're becoming a fan of it, is because of things like this. But it doesn't always work. It just doesn't. Like, and it can't always work. I watched another movie with Heather Mahakal, which was the Indian response to Nightmare on Elm Street. And in that film, the musical numbers really don't work, and they really are out of. But here's the thing: like, they could have worked. They totally could have if they had the monster sing, or again, like, there are plenty of ways to make it work, but they didn't. They just kind of went the easy route. In this movie, the first 30 minutes feels kind of like the easy route.
Yeah,
because like the second and third act of this movie are tonally consistent with one another. And the first act is so different. And it's not that it couldn't have worked by being different. It's that this doesn't work because it's not particularly entertaining. It's not particularly interesting. And it kind of feels a little weird. Again, like, it's just like strange. Like, the musical number's kind of strange. And then like, he's like, well, we're just been telling you where we are this whole time. And it's like, wait, like that, what?
Like, I think, as kind of corny the first one was, it had way more corny moments throughout. And I think that first 30 minutes offers as a transition from the first one that was kind of silly and actiony into one that was not. Like, once you get in this act 2 and 3, I mean, it was just kind of a kick-ass action flick.
Right. I think, let me put it this way. I think the transition worked better in the first movie from kind of fun sitcom-y nonsense to an action movie, because they do the same thing here. The first act in the first movie is very much the first act in this movie. It's, aren't they cute together? It's a meet cute. Like, here it's like they're a cute family, and she wants her son to be more Pakistani and he wants his son to be more Indian. Like, that's cute, and I like that. But it goes on for too long, and I think that's the issue. It's not bad that they added it to the movie. It's just, it's not as interesting as I think they thought it was going to be, and it takes up too much time. Because, like you said, everything else in this movie is really compelling. Sajad Delafruz as Abu Usman is really good. He reminded me a lot of, and again, I think it's an unfair comparison, but it's something that I think a lot of people could at least understand. He has, in some scenes, Alan Rickman in Die Hard vibe, where he's like this pompous asshole, because his entire character is not necessarily what he seems. He's very inspired by Osama bin Laden. Like, like, he's Western educated, was in America, was a teacher, and he was stopped on 9/11, and he was sent to Guantanamo Bay, and it's like he is the amalgamation of all of America's worst crimes against the rest of the world in our war on terror. I mean, again, like, what's the easiest way to make a terrorist, right? Just go and bully people in another country and kill them with drones. I mean, that's what our country did. And even they have that in this movie. They have the character of Hassan, the little boy whose family was killed by a drone strike. Again, like, I really love this movie's take on the United States. It cracks me up.
Yes.
It's very like, they are a bunch of fucking bastards, which, you're not wrong.
Yeah, the movie kind of painted the U.S. military as just assholes and don't give a crap about anybody else. And there was the point where they were kind of like with Zoya on that mission to distract, and they're like, all right, we're done, we're out. And
she's like, hey, wait, I need you guys for another minute. We're out of here. Oh, we're done. Yeah. We did the exact bare minimum that was asked of us.
We fulfilled our 15 minutes. Goodbye.
Right. And then you have like terrorists showing up to sell oil to the Americans, and then they try to just blow him up. Like, again, I mean, yeah, he's a terrorist. So.
Why are we doing a terrorist?
He came in as a businessman and left a terrorist. Yeah, what do we do to terrorists? Oh, my God. Paresh Rawal as Firdaus, the undercover raw agent, I think is probably my favorite part of this entire movie. He is awesome. So much fun. And I think, again, like, he is where a lot of the twists and turns of the movie come from, because you don't know who he's with until it's made more or less readily apparent, and he essentially has to come out and say it because he has a gun pointed at his head. But I had not seen him in anything else, but I really liked him in this movie.
Yeah, he was fun. He was a good character.
He walked away with the movie in the scenes that he's in.
He was kind of a caricature almost, because he was so over the top, but it worked because he, they kind of portrayed him as this car salesman-y, fast talking type of guy. And he's just in everybody's pocket and playing all sides.
But I guess he is a raw agent. I mean, again, he, best we can tell, he ends up coming clean. He's like, well, I'm in with you guys. I'm ultimately like your head kind of contact here. I mean, again, like, it's a little bit of a stretch, but it's this spy movie thing that I don't think they can help doing, and I like it because it works here. Sometimes
Yeah.
it feels like it doesn't work because they have to have the character do things that the character would not do. And this movie explains it away where they're like, Shanoy said to scare the shit out of you. So if you guys break now, at least you're not breaking at the hospital. Like, I appreciate that that's kind of them explaining why he was doing what he was doing. Because otherwise they're just yada yadaing. It's like, don't, oh, now that there's a twist, don't remember that he acted so weird for like half the movie anyways. Like it literally acted in a way that even if he is a double agent, he wouldn't do that to you because that would be actively negatively affecting you. Like that's where twists don't land, is when it's like the character acted one way the entire movie and now you expect me to believe that they're not that way, even though all the things they did are so negative to what's going on that it's like you might as well be a bad guy. It doesn't matter if you're a double agent.
And I also like the take on just like the whole situation, talking about how the U.S. military was portrayed. And I'm not saying it's incorrect
or undeserved, frankly.
Right.
I mean, we're not going to throw the military under the bus, but like they do in this movie.
Yeah. But like the overall feel of the effort is humanitarian. Like that's what it's kind of all about. Doesn't matter. And you mentioned it too, like the kid who had family killed from drones. I think it's cool that this humanitarian look from the movie, it kind of focuses on aspects of these pockets in the world that have these terrorist groups and how they impact other countries and communities and stuff. Because like U.S. movies aren't really taking the time to share that part of it. Why? Because we're the ones sending the drones,
Right.
We're not going to talk about the kid whose family got killed by our drones. So I thought it was kind of cool that they took the time to kind of in a way tell some stories about the impact of that. You've got the kid, you've got those women that were forced to like clean the floors and basically do the bidding of the men in the city council. And, they're just women captured by this terrorist group. I mean, we all know it happens like in real life.
And the movie doesn't sugarcoat it either.
No. Like I just really appreciated that it kind of talked about the dirty side of all this.
Well, and using a real life event as kind of the framing device, I think is interesting because the setup is good. You've got these terrorists at this hospital and they've kind of taken over and they have these nurses hostage and they're not going to let them go. So of course they need to get them in there, but they can't just get in there. So they have to fake injuries at the oil refinery nearby to be brought to the hospital to then do the mission from inside the hospital as these oil workers. I think the movie goes through some interesting plot beats that feel fresh and fun.
Yeah, it's a hell of a plan.
Right.
And it wasn't flawless, which I appreciate too.
Right. And we get the good, putting the team together scene that we do get that. So there's a little bit of not like a heist movie feel, but it's not it's not just Tiger and Zoya in this movie. It's Tiger and Zoya and Abrar from the first movie, played by Gabi Chahal, who is in the third movie, but he's one of the people that's trying to track them down at the airport in Cuba in the first movie and is chasing after them in the car. And I mean, there's a fair amount of like interesting side characters like Namit and Rakesh, who are agents that Tiger brings with him. I mean, again, like the movie is in a lot of ways the second and third act are exactly what I wanted from this movie, because it takes the first story and says, all right, you've seen a movie where it's the two of them against the world. Now let's see what happens when they come in with their own teams and they have this bigger threat that's bigger than just Zoya and Tiger. And it's so big that they have to bring other people in. And I appreciate that about a movie like this, because again, could have just been the two of them waltzing in there and whooping ass for an hour. Like, nothing stopping the film writers from doing that, because again, like these characters are bigger than life and they're superheroes essentially. So it could have worked.
Yeah. And I like the whole India-Pakistan team up thing too. Like, I thought that was cool.
I appreciate that, Yash Raj films, which are the subject of The Romantics on Netflix, the documentary, they are seemingly committed to helping continue to bridge the divide between India and Pakistan. And as, third-party outsiders, again, it's not that I don't have a dog in the fight. I have friends that are Pakistani. I have friends that are Indian. I have friends that are North Indian and South Indian. I have friends from South Asia, just to say that. So I have friends from all over the world, and I have friends from that part of the world from both sides of the quote line. They get along just like people in that area of the world get along all the time. It's just a matter of a line on the ground in a lot of ways. And I like that there's a scene in this movie where they talk about, where they have kind of the ISI and the RAW agents, and they're like, we have to work together. And it's like, yeah, you have to work together. And if we had been working together this whole time, maybe we could have actually gotten something done as opposed to worrying about what the other one is doing. I appreciate that the movie's willing to say that, because they said it in the last movie, and they kind of said it in Pathan as well. Like, again, like, and they're probably going to say it in Tiger 3. And I'm glad that YRF Films is committed to spreading, I think, a positive message of bridging the, ethnic and cultural divide between two countries that have so much in common, obviously. I mean, again, like,
yeah, and it's echoed a few times about, and that's what kind of bridges their gap in the movie is, it's humanitarian. It's where we've got a common enemy, and it's people that are killing people. Like, we can work together and stop it, or we can fight each other. So yeah, I kind of like that whole message throughout.
Well, and ultimately you have a second and third act that feels fuller than it would have if it had just been Tiger. Because obviously, I think this movie and this series really only works at this point where it's Zoya and Tiger on a mission together. Because I'm not saying that Salman Khan and Katrina Kaif couldn't do it on their own. We do see scenes of them being badass separately in this movie, but it's because that you're promised that they're going to kick ass together and be good in a scene together. And I was kind of disappointed that the third act of this movie, had Katrina Kaif kind of taken out of the mix and put away for a while. I wasn't a huge fan of that.
Oh, when she was captured.
Yeah, the damsel in distress thing. I mean, I get it. It ups the stakes, but it kind of feels unnecessary. She's such a badass. Like, it's just hard to take it seriously because she's out of commission for essentially the third act.
Yeah, you hardly see her.
Which is a shame because, like, again, she is as much a part of this movie as Salman Khan is. She is there from essentially the second scene of the movie. It's his scene with his son, with their son, and then it's them, all three of them. So again, like that, it's a minor complaint, but it's a valid one, I feel, because the third act of the third movie had the two of them together running away from, ISI and Raw. And that was really fun.
Yeah. Well, and I got pretty excited when she showed up in the car to save Tiger. Like, watching it, I was like, oh, yeah, here she is. I knew she was coming.
Well, and it's, again, like you said, like, she's going to be in the second and third act of this movie. And I find it hard to believe she wouldn't have told him she was coming. Like, right? Like, again, like, they make some weird choices. Like, this movie kind of
send a text.
Right. Well, it's like the movie kind of, there's part of it that kind of feels like it stands alone from the last movie. Kind of like a less a sequel and more kind of like a soft reboot. Because again, like, she shows up out of the blue. Perfect timing, mind you, Ghostbusters Afterlife style, where she's just there in the nick of time to stop someone from killing him. It's like, would have been nice if you had gotten here 30 seconds earlier. But yeah, well, again, like, they never have the scene where the character shows up and they're dead already. I mean, we've seen it, but it's not very frequent. It's like Samuel L. Jackson and Taron Egerton's scene where it's like, it already happened. It's, whatever. And there's other movies where it's like, you're too late. But rarely do these movies do that. It's like, you're never too late. And it's a little contrived because she would have just been like, I'm coming with you. Like,
she had to find a sitter.
But the way the characters were in the first movie, she would not have just let him go by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like, it feels a little bit like a soft reboot because the character doesn't necessarily act the same way. At least she and him don't necessarily interact the same way they did in the last. And, I mean, ultimately, that makes sense. But also, this feels like such a different kind of movie than the last one. The last movie felt really very Bourne, and this feels very like Zero Dark 30 in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, it's Zero Dark 30 with, like I said before, with a lot of the planning that went in, and they show how the plan's executed. Like, I really like that, like the playbook of it.
It's like a heist movie.
Of it. Yeah, I like that. Like the way they did it in more of a military strategy versus trying to steal something. They're just trying to rescue people.
I just, I don't think it's bad. I mean, again, like bad, I think is such a kind of a not useful word in a lot of ways when it comes to like cinema. This movie is bad. Like, what the fuck does that mean? I just don't think it works very well to have a movie where you have two very big personality characters who were very well defined in your last movie start acting against type and against the way their character. If he goes, I'm leaving, she's going, I'm going too, and we're gonna stick our kid with somebody. Like, it's just hard for me to believe otherwise, because again, the way the characters were written at the end of the last movie, they're ride or die, and you're telling me she's just gonna like sit at home in Switzerland? Like, I find it hard to believe. And again, her showing up saves his life.
It is. You kind of smirked at me when I said it a minute ago, but it is hard to find a sitter in short notice.
That's what it is. Tiger Zinda Hai. Yes, he's alive, and he needs a sitter.
They could have had Shinaway watch the kid
with his oxygen tank.
Yeah, that would have been kind of a addition to some silliness into the movie. Like, they'd cut to Shinaway like trying to be all serious about something and be like scolding their kid. And
I mean, that could have worked.
Yeah,
that would have been some light comedy.
Yeah,
I don't know how the Amir Bagdawi character works, but played by Sal Youssef. Feels a little unnecessary.
Oh, the number 2.
Yeah, he feels a little unnecessary only because we don't get like a sense of what his character's point is. Like, he's the number 2, but he's not intimidating. He's just another businessman. And in a lot of ways, yeah, okay. And in a lot of ways, Sajad Delafruze's character is just like Alan Rickman in Die Hard. He's not a physical threat. He's a threat because he has a gun and you don't. Like, that's why he's a threat. Like, I mean, again, true. Like, and Amir Bagdawi is kind of the same way. He's just a dude. He's not a threat to you unless he has a gun, which is proven by the point that Katrina Kaif literally walks into a room and kills him in 2 seconds. Again, they had to build him up as such a threat and a villain and a nasty guy because, again, he's like kidnapping and sexually assaulting women, and he's doing it with relatively wanton abandon. Like, they have to make him terrible essentially off screen because there's nothing really intimidating about him, and he kind of feels like an afterthought. It doesn't, like, how he factors into the plot doesn't really, they kind of don't ever expound upon it. They're like, he's his number 2. Okay. To what end? For what reason? Why? Like, again, like, he sells oil and makes money, and that makes him a terrorist, I guess. Like, or he is just a terrorist who sells money. Like, movie can't decide.
Well, I mean, terror organization has to make money, Sure. So it's highlighting the hierarchy of an organization like that.
But it could have been better established what his job was doing in regards to what's going on in the movie, because they know something is going on. They know people are trying to get to these nurses and stop them, because Abu Usman is very suspicious of Tiger the moment he's there. And they essentially know something's going on. It almost feels like they know something's going on. They're letting it happen. I mean, I know that's not the case, but he's suspicious of him immediately because he's Indian. They're like, wow, you're Indian. What are you doing here?
And he even said he had eyes like a tiger.
Right. Like, and Amir Bagdawi's character, like, you're not really given that scene. You're given the scene of, like, again, people talking about him and then Firdaus saving him, but like, you don't really get a sense of who his character is, and then he's just killed. And there was an opportunity there to give this character something to do more than just kind of look intimidating and explained in dialogue off screen while staring at him, because that's literally what most of it is.
And he does just kind of pop up, like, there he is. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Because again, like, you do need to have a secondary villain for one of the other characters to kill. I mean, it only makes sense. You have Katrina Kaif with someone and Salman Khan with someone, and they do that. They have Katrina Kaif kill the character of Bagdawi. So, like, again, they just didn't establish him as much of a character, which is a shame because they spent time in other parts of this movie that don't pay off. There was time, if they take away half of the opening segment, to give our villain, that's the secondary villain, a little bit more of a backstory, a little bit more of a reason for him to be on the chopping block as a threat, because he doesn't feel like a threat. He just feels like, again, like a guy, a terrorist in a suit. His dudes are more intimidating than he is. That one, like, roid raged guy.
Oh, yeah.
That dude was wild. Yeah, hey, I'm gonna, I'm stupid bitch, bang. Just like, fucking shit. Good God. Like, that is more kind of in line with what I'm talking about, where it's like this character's written in such a big way. I get it. Like, I get what you're going for. I understand what this character is. Like, can't expect me to get that by just showing me, oh, he's a rich oil guy. Draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, that other thug you're talking about, he kind of matches Tiger's energy when they fight. Like, he's kind of the what is it, the ISC? Is that what they were called?
Yeah, supposed to be ISIL.
Yeah, he's kind of the ISC Tiger.
Kind of gets killed unceremoniously, though. A lot earlier than I thought he was going to check out from the movie.
The fall from the building, right?
Well, then Tiger breaks his neck. He's just like on the ground, and Tiger breaks his neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he kind of just dies unceremoniously like any other goon would. And it was, again, like they kept kind of highlighting that character, and then he just, bye. It was a little strange. I get, like, maybe we've just been spoiled by movies like Bahubali, where they give a character a little bit of time to grow, but they did in the first movie. I mean, again, the problem, I think, is the first movie, we didn't have a villain, quote unquote. And this is the first time that the writers are having to write a villain for the Tiger movies. Because, again, in the first movie, it's the world that's the villain, not not a, quote, specific character like Abu Usman or Firdaus, at least through the first, at least the second act. And I just think that's probably the failing of this, because we know that we're going to see villains that are compelling later in the YRF spy films. I mean, Jesus Christ. Jim in Pathan is like, he was an interesting character, and you fell for him and felt for him as a character because he had an interesting backstory that was established in one scene.
Yeah.
It's not like they took half the movie. I mean, I watched Entheron 2.0. They spend an entire act of that movie fleshing out the villain, and he ends up becoming the best part of that movie because they gave him an interesting backstory, and then the rest of the movie is just them trying to force him into another movie. This movie feels, in a lot of ways, kind of the same. It feels like a different movie, and then Tiger and Zoya show up. It's like they walked in from another movie, and like it's again, it works in spite of that. Honestly, like, it really works in spite of the fact that this movie is kind of tonally at odds with itself. I didn't dislike this movie. I like this movie a fair amount, but it doesn't feel like a Tiger movie, because a Tiger movie felt a little bit more tonally unique. Like, this movie feels very much like an action movie.
Yeah. It lost some of the secret sauce that the first one had, I guess you could say.
Lost a little bit of the heart that the first movie had, because Tiger and Zoya were together most of that movie. I think the mistake in this movie was the two of them being separated for so long. So I was saying, like, the characters act atypical because there's no way they wouldn't have gone on this mission together. And they knew that there were Pakistani nurses too. It could have been as easy as, like, well, Pakistan's best agent is missing, India's best agent is missing. They're both missing together, and we need both of them now more than ever. Cut to them lying naked somewhere on a beach, and all of a sudden Shenoy shows up, standing above them going, I need you. And then their minister, the Pakistani one, is in, we need you. There you go. You could see that. And that makes more sense and leaves more time for the actual building of the movie and the conflict, because it feels like the movie takes a half an hour detour to the beautiful mountains in Switzerland.
Yeah. And then he's got quite a place up in the mountains too.
Boy, doesn't he? Good God. Yeah, I thought he was getting paid like a couple $100,000 a year, which ended up like a couple million, not a couple million a year, ended up into the couple $100 million. That's like where they're living is like, again, like, it feels just like it's out of a different movie. Like, even against the first movie's kind of suburban setting, like, this movie's trying to replicate that. And it feels just very weird when it does.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not because the characters of Tiger and Zoya aren't believable as parents. They totally are. When he's interacting with his son, like, it's very cute. And Salman Khan is believable in a way that Schwarzenegger isn't in Commando. Because, again, like, you have to have a character who is hard enough to be a badass, but soft enough to raise a kid. And I think Salman Khan embodies that. It's a vulnerability,
Physique. I mean, he is like a Sylvester Stallone type,
yeah.
And he can kind of do an action movie like a Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
But he's got that side that you just mentioned that a lot of those actors can't pull off.
But Stallone can.
Stallone can. I guess I meant when you were saying Schwarzenegger.
But I mean, again, like, what's funny is Stallone can. And, like, I think people forget that. because he is kind of associated with Schwarzenegger and Van Damme and Lundgren. And I mean, again, not that those guys can't do the dramatic thing. I think they all have in various forms, but I think it's not their main thing. And I think they would admit that that's something that they do for whatever reason, break up the monotony, try something else, what have you. But they made their bones in the action movie. Yeah. And people forget that Stallone really didn't. Like, he was Rocky before he was, he was Italian porn star, but softcore porn star. But he was Rocky before he was Rambo. Like, again, like that, he got his start in a much different direction. His perception now is, like, you know, all of that. And that's his perception now. But that was a serious role. He was nominated, directed that movie, if I'm not mistaken, or at least wrote it. So, I mean, Stallone has dramatic chops. I think people forget that. But to your point, like, Salman Khan has that energy. I don't want to compare him to Stallone because, again, comparing Salman Khan to Stallone is to diminish Salman Khan's acting abilities, because Salman Khan is a better actor than what his American contemporaries would be. But that's the case for a lot of these Indian actors, because they're venerated like gods. And I'll say it again, say it every episode. I'll beat it into the audience at some point. I'll have to stop saying it. But he's amazing, as always. He's so good.
Yeah, he's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's a genuinely fun actor.
And it's easy to watch. Like, and I say that because there are subtitles on there, and like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because he's still portraying the character and evoking a feeling, and like, you still get it.
Well, and again, when you pair him up with someone like Katrina Kaif, who I think is also as charismatic as he is, you really get a winning combination. I mean, this is like their, fifth movie together, I think. I think their last movie together was Ek the Tiger, and that was their fourth. So this is like their fifth movie together. Jesus Christ. There's a reason they keep casting these two actors opposite. There's a reason we're getting another one of these movies in 2023. Like, it's not a surprise. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that this movie came out in 2017. The action movie landscape has changed dramatically in the world, let alone India. Like, this movie feels very pedestrian compared to Pathaan. Like, such a pedestrian movie comparatively. It's such a quiet movie in the way that Pathaan is not, but that's the intent of a movie like Pathaan. It's like to make it look like the scene with Salman Khan as Tiger is the most recent thing we've seen of him as Tiger, other than the trailer for I would say Ek the Tiger 3, but Tiger 3, whatever the name of that movie be. It's going to be Tiger something. Tiger is here. Tiger is back. Tiger paints a fucking picture out in the woods. Who knows? But the character that he portrays in Pathaan is the same. It's kind of not even the same character that is in this movie.
Yeah.
It's more in line with the tone of Pathaan's version of what Tiger would be.
Right.
Because like he's a little smarmier in Pathaan than he is in this movie or the last movie.
Yeah, this movie he's quite serious.
Yeah. Like throughout. Like he does bring a little bit of levity to it and a little bit of just genuine comedy, because Salman Khan, I think, is just a genuinely probably funny person who has good comedic timing. But yeah, he's not doing the that he was last movie, which I don't think is needed here, obviously. But I don't know, it added a little bit of depth to his performance in the last movie that I think, again, if he had been around Katrina Kaif more, I think we would have seen more depth to the role in this movie. He feels more like a part in this movie, less the focus. The focus almost, again, it feels like the stuff it feels like the main character of the movie in a lot of ways is that nurse in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, the scarf, when we saw it in Pathaan, scarf, like, we immediately knew that was a thing, a defining element of Tiger. And yeah, okay, we saw it in the first one. Now in this one, not only is he always wearing it and people on his team are wearing him, but he actually has a fight scene with one.
Well, and then in Pathaan, they use it.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, because he's throwing it at people in that one, I think, or something to that effect.
So I think that's kind of funny that even though this movie didn't have the same kind of silly tone that the first one did, like the fact that he starts beating people up with a scarf, I was like, that's funny. There we go.
Well, I mean, again, like, that's the character that I expect him to be, because that was my expectation from the first movie. This movie's stakes are just so much higher and so much more serious. If this movie feels a lot more serious than the last one, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not complaining that, movies shouldn't be serious, but I think you should try to stay tonally consistent because it's not like the tone of the first movie didn't work. And it's not like the tone of the first movie would work any less with the tone of something like Pathan than this one. This feels more at odds with what Pathan is than the first movie. First movie felt a little less grounded in reality somehow, even though its inspiration is Bourne Identity. This movie tries to be like, this is real. Because again, it's based off of a real thing. So it can't help but be
That's
like,
true.
oh, I'm going to shoot. I mean, again, like the scene where he's like, I'm going to shoot this woman that tried to escape. It'll make you a better person. Like that felt so Hans Gruber, mustache twirling bad guy. Like, and then he just does these like essentially long soliloquies too. Like that feels like it should have been played more bombastically. Because that's the thing about Die Hard. Die Hard's not a serious movie. Die Hard's fun. This movie, it's like it's trying to be serious, but it doesn't want to be serious. But yet in the first act, you've got like women being shot in the head point blank and just like all sorts of like, and again, like women being talked about them being sexually assaulted and stuff. But it's like that's not the tone of these movies.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't the tone of the first one. And it feels kind of like the characters of Tiger and Zoya have to adapt to the situation of this movie, less this is a movie that they should have been in or was being written for them. I appreciate that this is taken from real life, but I'm not sure that that's like a benefit here. I'm not sure that the movie benefits from, riffing on real life events. I mean, it's an interesting story, women being captured in a hospital and somebody's got to go save them, but that ends up being like an afterthought.
Well, it begs the question if Tiger 3 is going to continue like Tiger 2 with that type of tone to it, or is it going to reset and bring back its the Tiger roots?
Well, what would you prefer?
Well, given that in Pathan, we see him show up with a cup of water.
Right.
So Pathan can take some pills. Like, and so,
that's why he had the water. That's the only reason. Now that we both think about it, like, because it's not like a thing. Like, it's not a thing in these movies.
Yeah, I was hoping to see like maybe that was his thing too, was always having water, but nope. But because that happened, like, is this, this one in the movie we just watched, they tried to land the fact or, land that his character is this thoughtful person, caring person. Here he is in Pathan being thoughtful and caring and bringing him some water to take his pain pills. So I don't know. I think in Tiger 3, it'll be a lot like Tiger 2 or Tiger Zinda Hai. But I'd like it to have a little more like the Tiger.
I'm with you. I mean, what I want from Tiger 3 is there to be more Katrina Kaif and Tiger on screen together in the action scene. Because a lot of it is just like their kind of like family life, which again, not bad, but doesn't add anything. Like it is ultimately just there to give us a look into their lives, but it's just, it goes on for too long. And even again, like the movie sings when they're together, when it's the two of them, because they have great chemistry together and they look great together on screen. But the movie and the narrative is all about separating the two of them, because the narrative does not require them to be together to the point where the intention was they were not going to be together, because he left without her and she stayed behind, as far as he knew, until she was just there in a scene. I want more of the two of them together, because I feel like the comedy and the action flows easier with the two of them together on screen. And it did. And again, that's why Ek the Tiger is, I think, for me, still the superior film. I think it works better than this movie. Even though this movie is a better action, I think Ek the Tiger is a better movie because it tells a complete, unique as it can be for telling a spy kind of in the wild, hiding in plain sight type thing. It tells a good version of that story that's been told before. This movie kind of just feels like I've seen it before.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the other movies I've seen are better. I'm just saying that this movie doesn't feel as fun and unique as the first movie.
Well, and we've said it already, what I do like about, even though it's something, the format is what we've seen before, I do like the perspective of it, because it's something that we don't get with movies out of here, the perspective of of how we look to other countries and how it might be a terror plot or terrorist organization might be viewed through another country's lens. So that was cool. That was compelling. I thought about that a lot while watching it.
I also appreciate that the only American that they interface with at the White House is clearly like Australian. It's clearly an Australian actor trying to do like a very bad American accent. You have 3 days, Sheenoi. Like, whoa, man, your R's are real hard, pal. And that's, you can tell with like British actors always have like the hard, they're always saying their R's really hard, want to go over there to the car. And then like Australian actors, sometimes they do the same thing. I'm actually surprised. Most Australian actors can do a very convincing American accent. Like Guy Pearce, Chris Hemsworth, like plenty of Australian actors can do passable American accent.
It's like the guy just got like a phone interview to get the part. They're like, so it says on your actor's resume you can do a really good American accent. Yep. Okay. Well, should we shoot on this day? And then he shows up and does it. And they're all like, okay, well, let's just roll with it.
I promise I'm American. Sure. It's just funny because it's like, I'm going to go meet with my connection in the U.S. government. It's like, it's not even a real person who would be remotely American. Again, like I was expecting it to be like more in line with what happens when the characters go to talk with the guy on the base.
Yeah.
But he's like, oh, you know, like just kind of this like kind of scoundrelly weirdo. Yeah, that guy. He's kind of like a scoundrel, kind of out for his own, you know, well-being and his own money and his own. He's looking out for himself, right? I was expecting more of that from the White House character, less a dude doing a terrible American accent.
Yeah.
Also, I will say this is the most English I've heard in a Indian cinema movie so far, together and holistically. There's a lot of English in this movie.
That's true. The other kind of goon with the ISC, the big dude with the red beard.
Right. That guy.
Yeah.
Guy, real out of place. Let's put it that way.
You so out of.
Like if you were in the movie, it would literally be like, all I could think was like, this be like if Dustin, if you've never seen Dustin, which more than likely you never have, imagine the guy in this movie, but not as yoked, because the dude in the movie is fucking yoked too. He's like 6'5" and a big ass red beard, but all I could think was like, that's just Dustin standing there in this movie, like staring like, what am I fucking doing here?
And he's just hollering at everybody in English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, the character of Abu Usman is like, again, he's like Western trained. He speaks English most of his line.
Yeah.
It's not much of a threat though, because like Tiger beats his ass like handily.
I actually like that when Tiger meets the main bad guy. I actually liked that like it was over quick.
Right. It makes sense. Like he's not again, like he's not a threat because he's just a guy with a gun. Yeah, I like the way this movie wraps up. It was a nice little twist to have, you know, Firdaus be the one who, you know, oh, I need to get you out of here. And then, you know, I just is like, do you hear that whistling, motherfucker? Like night time. I appreciate that because again, like it doesn't have to be, I mean, Tiger doomed him, but Tiger ultimately wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. And I appreciated that because again, like I'm not going to say that the villain in this movie is sympathetic, but again, like he kind of is. It's painted with a rather broad brush and he's, you know, I was tormented by the United States and I was in Guantanamo and they locked me up and threw away the key and blah, blah, blah. Like, I get it. I get what they're going for. They're airing, like, again, he is the amalgamation of all of the sins of our country. And
the U.S. formed this monster.
Right. And like it makes sense that the threat in the movie is also the United States acting with wanton abandon, right? And blowing the shit out of Ikrit. So like it makes sense because ultimately the Americans are as much the villains in this movie as the villain that they more or less created.
Yeah.
But that's not a Tiger movie. That's just, it doesn't feel like, to me, it feels like something else.
It makes it seem like they did the first one and they were like, you know, we should do this again, but like take out the silly stuff. Like you said, soft reboot. I really do think that might have been what happened. Like to reset the vibe. Yeah.
It's not a bad thing when the vibe needs to be reset, but I like the vibe the first movie was going for. I think what happened,
I did too.
And we were joking about this at the end of the last episode we did together on Ek the Tiger. Where does it go? What sequel do you, like, you don't need a sequel here. And frankly, what would have been better, and, you know, again, for me, and this is just me, you know, again, take the second movie out of it, because like all ultimately that comes out of the second movie is he's still on the run, but he has a kid this time, because they end up in the same place that they were at the end of the first movie, at the end of the second movie, like 100% the same spot.
But now he's got 2 kids.
Oh, right. I'm sure that, I mean, that was a nice little payoff, but again, like, that's not what I want to see in the next movie, so it doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's great. But like my concern is with the third movie, and my hope and my want is it to be more like Patan tonally with what Salman Khan can bring to that. Because again, like you just let the actor be the character, pair him with someone who is a good foil for him, and let it run. That's why Patan is so good, because they already knew the formula from Ek the Tiger and they were just building on it. I just think this movie is a little bit of a misstep because, again, the stakes make sense why Tiger and Zoya are involved, but those two characters don't feel like they match up with what this movie's needing for a protagonist. It feels like this would have needed like a group of dudes put together who are going to like make good on some like a Suicide Squad type thing, where it's like a suicide mission. Like this is that kind of movie where it's like, this is a suicide mission. You're trying to go and do something really dangerous that like you could die just trying to get to the thing that you're trying to do. Like there was no guarantee they ever left the oil refinery alive because they have to like try and fake burn themselves to get to the hospital. Like that, I think that would have worked better as the protagonist side of the equation, because that makes sense more than Salman Khan going on this suicide mission when he has a kid and when he has Katrina Kaif. Like the way they set it up is a lot more kind of, I don't know, like the stakes are very high to the point where Tiger just doesn't feel like the right kind of character for this conflict. And again, like the first movie didn't have a villain, so maybe that's why it's hard for us to gauge it. And this movie did have a villain, but even then, it's not like in Patan where the villain was taunting Patan and it was like, I'm going to get you. And it's me and you, man. Like that's what we need with Tiger, is like someone who is his equal, not someone that he could walk up and just fucking kill in 2 seconds. Again, it works here because that guy had to be that kind of character. But like they need a character like Patan's Jim, who is a physical threat as well as a emotional and mental threat. Because that's what Jim was. He was both. And that, like, if you're going to give us villains in these movies and give us a little bit of time with the villains, which they do in this movie, they need to be not a mirror image of our hero, but a perverted image of our hero, or not necessarily the inverse, but a mutated version, like the mirror. Bowser. Yeah, like they need someone that is their equal, and Abu Usman wasn't. There wasn't really a villain in the first movie, so I'm assuming the third movie is gonna have that big villain that Salman Khan will have to beat ass on, like Patan did with Jim in Patan. Because it's the logical next progression of the formula.
The second one leaves me excited for the third one,
and the trailer for the third one left me excited for the third one.
Yeah, these movies have been doing a pretty good job of keeping me hooked.
And I think Patan did a good job of hyping me for the third movie. Because again, if the version we see of Tiger in the third Tiger movie is more in line with the version we just saw, then that movie aims to be pretty good, I feel like. At least it'll be entertaining. And this movie wasn't lacking in being entertaining. I just think it was a little muddle-headed when it came to the story it was trying to tell. Because again, it's they can't get super crazy because it is based off of a real event. But like, Tiger and Zoya aren't necessitated in real life event handling. Like they need to handle a threat that's like a massive threat. Like Patan did. Like Patan was dealing with essentially like an India-wide threat. Like this is like, again, not to sound pedestrian or like a dick or anything, but it was 40 women in a hospital. The stakes are not what Patan is. Like you said, it's a humanitarian threat. It's not a world-ending threat. So it just has different stakes. And I think that part of it works. I just don't think that Tiger and Zoya work in like I don't know, like these characters don't fit here. Not by like much, but it is a little bit of like a force.
Yeah. Well, maybe it all comes together in Tiger 3.
Final thoughts on Tiger Zinda Hai?
Well, I mean, again, I thought I really enjoyed the whole heisty, espionage aspect of it. That was my favorite part, was when they're executors or planning their strategy and executing it. Like the whole mission part of the movie was great. Did I want more Zoya? Yeah. Or Tiger and Zoya? Yeah. But I still accepted it, and it like I just said a little bit ago, left me wanting to see what they do with Tiger 3. And I'm curious if in the Spyverse timeline, is Tiger 3 going to happen before Patan, or Pathaan happens before Tiger 3. I'm curious at how they're going to tie those two together.
I will echo most of what you have said. Again, I enjoyed the movie for the most part. I don't think I don't think you could, you could do a lot worse than this movie, but I think you could do better, which is the first movie. But this movie, if you've seen the first one, is more Tiger and more Zoya and more of the two of them together, and as much as the movie gives you. And there's a lot of them separately interacting with new and interesting characters or some characters you've seen before. And there's a sweet shot of Salman Khan with no shirt on. That is slow-mo shot. And we're left to linger on that man's pecs for quite some time. And all of that adds to the tone of this being an over-the-top, fun action. I just think that, for me, there are parts of this movie that clash with that and that expectation that the first movie kind of set us up for, because the second part of that movie is a pretty kind of big, bombastic action movie. Not with a lot of people getting killed, but with just a lot of stunts and practical effects. And this movie kind of has a similar feel in the second act, but I just think that the conflict here is a little bit too serious for characters that are, again, superheroes effectively. So I'm with you, though. I'm super excited for the third one. I can't wait to see what the Spyverse yields up from here, because where we go from here is a movie that I think will satisfy us in ways that this movie maybe didn't, because the next time we're going to be talking about 2019's War, which stars, oh my God, it stars the dreamboat Hrithik Roshan and Jackie Shroff's son, Tiger Shroff, in a movie that looks insane, actively wild. So I am super excited to watch that with you and talk all about it, as I know you're excited to talk about it as well, because this has been a lot of fun. These movies are so much fun.
And I can't wait to see more about how they make the US look like douches.
There's none of that in Pathaan at all.
Because I really enjoyed that in this movie. Like, egg on our face, we're dumbasses.
Right.
We're a bunch of assholes.
If any Americans watch this film, enjoy. Enjoy.
Yeah. Wow, we're dicks.
So until then, you can find Dustin and I over at weirdingwaymedia.com, where he and I do a fair amount of these shows, and Dustin's done some album artwork for some other shows, and Dustin's just he's a man about town. And he's a man, just like you expect from two people talking about Indian cinema, two Midwesterners talking about Indian cinema. But that's where you can find him. That's where you can find me, along with so many other shows that I work on, like the Culture Cast and Scary Stories We Tell, and all those fun things. So that's where you can find that. As for this show, BollywoodCinemaClub.com. Social media, cool if you want to. I get it if you don't. And please, by all means, rate, and review the show wherever you find it, because that helps us find our audience. That helps our audience find more awesome Indian cinema movies to check out, because, guys, it's coming. Don't be reactive. Be proactive, because 2 years from now or sooner than that, people are going to be like, I really loved all these Indian cinema movies I'm just finding. And you know what? We're ahead of it, guys. So
Netflix is already making documentaries about it.
It's true. It's coming.
We've been doing podcasts about it way before that.
Yeah, it's true. Facts, folks. And we'll catch you on the next episode.